Welcome back to America's Voice Live. The Senate confirmation hearing for Judge Merrick Garland to be the next U.S. Attorney General is well underway in the Senate. Judge Merrick Garland has vowed to be, quote, mindful of the tremendous responsibility of leading the Justice Department. To talk more about this, I want to bring in Paul Kamenar, counsel to the National Legal and Policy Center. Paul, your group is calling on the Senate Judiciary Committee to ask Attorney General nominee Judge Merrick Garland about his role in dismissing a misconduct complaint regarding the 1983 bombing of the U.S. Capitol and other federal buildings. Can you tell us or tell our audience more about that?
Yeah, real simple. In 1983, the U.S. Capitol was bombed, and the ones that were arrested included Susan Rosenberg. She was sentenced to prison, but Bill Clinton commuted her sentence. And where is she now? She's taking her skills to Black Lives Matter. At the same time, her co-defendant skipped bail, and there's an arrest warrant. In fact, if you go to the FBI, she's still on the most wanted list. But what happened was in 2009, the Obama Justice Department walked into court, one sentence said, "We hereby move to dismiss the indictment against Elizabeth Duke." The magistrate granted that. She had no authority to do that, only a federal district judge, not a magistrate. A complaint was filed against that judge to Merrick Garland. And he said, oh, there's nothing here. There's no inference of misconduct. And he did that in 2014. So we want the Senate to ask Merrick Garland, wait a minute, you think it was okay to dismiss charges against someone who bombed the U.S. Capitol? So this is very disturbing. And there's other questions to be asked about his position on the death penalty for those who bomb federal buildings. And that gets into the Timothy McVeigh case.
Well, and going back to the situation with the woman that you're speaking of, who is now one of the leaders in Black Lives Matter, I mean, it's a good question for the moment, because we have a lot of people calling on the Justice Department to declare the Proud Boys a terrorist organization. But the opposite is true of Antifa and Black Lives Matter, even though we know Black Lives Matter was the group that went out and destroyed much of Minneapolis. They've also been involved in Portland and Seattle. So what would Merrick Garland do with that information if something like this came to the Justice Department? Isn't that a concern?
Well, exactly. And he was asked that question by a couple of the senators saying, hey, wait a minute, what's your position on those who stormed the federal building in the other cities that you've talked about? And he said a general answer that, we will prosecute anybody who interferes with justice in a federal building or attacks a federal building. Well, those are nice words. We'll just see how he carries that out. And he prides himself on prosecuting Timothy McVeigh, who bombed the federal building in Oklahoma City in 1995, and he got the death penalty. So he was asked that. Well, what's your position on the death penalty? Was that just then? He goes, well, I have no regrets, but since then I have some problem with the death penalty, and President Biden wants to call a moratorium. So I'm saying, and the senators are saying, so wait a minute, you have the Boston Marathon bomber who was found guilty. Are you saying you're going to take the death penalty off the table for him? And he kind of ducked that and said, well, if there's a policy that Biden says, I'll follow the policy. Yet at the same time, he's saying, oh, I'm going to be independent. I'm not going to take my marching orders from the White House. So he's having it both ways. So he's being a little disingenuous here.
Well, it's very concerning, because if he's going to take the president's opinion there, then does that mean that Kamala Harris, who went out and called on people to bail out these folks who were burning down buildings and attacking buildings and potentially even federal buildings, because we don't know where this fund went, but she called on people to put money into this fund to bail people out of jail? Is that something that could affect him as well?
Well, it might, in terms of whether there was some kind of criminal activity there. But what you basically talk about is the double standard. So they went after and impeached President Trump for calling for the marchers to be peaceful, and yet you have Kamala Harris saying, hey, I'll bail you out of jail for your violent crimes, and some of them went back and committed more attacks on buildings. So the double standard is really bad here, and Merrick Garland has got to make sure he enforces the law as it's written, and especially with the death penalty, because what he's basically saying is, well, there's some problems with race and innocence, but that's the state laws, not federal law. He can't point to one federal prosecution, whether it's Timothy McVeigh or the Boston bomber, where there's any doubt about their guilt. So this is really very fishy and very disappointing what's going on here.
We have about a minute left. Let's move on to Neera Tanden. She is the chosen nominee to lead the Office of Management and Budget. Now, she's going to get some hard questions because she has some pretty vile rhetoric out there on social media. So what is the National Legal and Policy Center's stance on Tanden?
Well, we think that, of course, she may not even get a hearing, because you had Senator Joe Manchin, the Democrat from West Virginia, saying, I'm not voting for her. She's very partisan. She attacked other senators, even Bernie Sanders and so forth. And so they need 50 votes to have her confirmed. So you got a Manchin not doing it. Then you had Susan Collins come out yesterday and saying, I'm not voting for her either. Now, Susan Collins is a Republican, but sometimes the Democrats can count on her vote to be on their side. So this may never even get to a hearing. I'm afraid that, well, not afraid, but I hope President Biden pulls her nomination, because she's a very activist person. The position of OMB is very, very powerful. A lot of people don't know that. They basically control the regulatory agenda in the federal government. They can make sure that these regulations are enforced unfairly against small businesses. So it's a real problem, and I hope she doesn't even get to the hearing stage.
Paul Kamenar, thank you so much. Counsel to the National Legal and Policy Center. We appreciate having you on. It's going to be interesting, these hearings.